Introduce who you all been waiting for. Sponsored by Just Run the Play Company, LLC. You all may know by many names. You only need to know one. DJ, watch them run the play.
This week's episode is brought to you by 318 Now Podcast. 318 Now Podcast focuses on the 318 community, where community leaders, entrepreneurs, and influential figures from the 318 area are brought on as guests each week. 318 Now Podcast motivates, informs, consults, and entertains its audience. Episodes are released every Tuesday evening, where they can be downloaded by visiting the 318 Now Podcast Facebook page or on iTunes. Like the 318 Now Podcast Facebook page for episode previews and releases.
Hey, it's Coach DJ Davis once again with another edition of Playmakers, brought to you by none other than the Just Run the Play Company and those great people over at Riverport Creative Group. Today in studio we have none other than Dr. Joshua Stockley. He's the Associate Professor of Political Science over at the University of Louisiana Monroe. Now that's my old alma mater. Now, I've known Josh for a long time, but it was definitely not in the classroom perspective because he's younger than I am. But what I do know is that he's highly involved in the community, coaching and doing a lot of things outside of the community. And he's here today just to give us some insight on some things that are going on politically, and also just give us some insight on what we should be looking forward to this year, presidential race, and then also, too, the importance of voting. For those of you out there right now that are not voting and not doing your due justice for the citizenship, shame on you. Josh, man, I'm glad to have you here today, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things you got going on. How long have you been over at ULM?
I've been at ULM since 2008. I grew up in Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma, got my PhD from the University of Oklahoma. In 2003, I got my first job offer down at Nicholls State, Southeast Louisiana. I did 5 years down there. They let me out on good behavior, and came up here in 2008, got an offer, and I've really enjoyed working for the University of Louisiana at Monroe.
Now, like I mentioned earlier, me and you officially met, youth basketball, and you did a great job working with my son, and your son played together, and we had a lot of kids out the community that were able to come together. As a matter of fact, because of that, they built long-term relationships, and I know they stay in communication a lot now, and that was probably, 5 or 6 years ago almost now, right?
Absolutely. It's fun to see them when they still see each other, saying hi, giving each other a high five, from those relationships that are built, and that's important. One of the things, we've talked about politics and voting, and I'm a political science professor.
Right.
And we know something about people who are likely to be politically active or vote. The people who are likely to vote are also people who are more likely to be active in their community or part of community associations. It's really difficult to be a community activist and not be a political activist because the two are intertwined.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people want to try to separate the two, and even myself. I'll be honest, it was a point in my life where I just really wanted to try to disassociate myself from the political anything, but I still want to be involved in the community. And what I found out was, as I got older, I can remember even taking a class in my undergrad years, struggle with American government, struggle. Came back and took the class as I, had a family, had my own business, and I looked at that whole class different, because there was no way for me to separate the two, man. I think it's important that you said that.
It is very important. And the skills that are developed in the community, whether it's in, my case, coaching your son, or your case, coaching many individuals, those skills are the same. I mean, everything you need to be successful, either in coaching or in the community, those are the same skills you use in politics. For example, even if we're dealing with 7- and 8-year-olds on a basketball court, we're trying to get them to see one goal. That is, I've got this ball, I've got to put it in the basket.
Yes.
And we have 8 different individuals with 8 different skills and 8 different motivations. How do I get those 8 kids to not only have the same goal? They all want to score, they all want to win.
Yeah.
How do I get them on the same page, utilizing each of their strengths and recognizing their weaknesses in order to get something accomplished That's the same thing in politics. We have 4.6 million people in the state. How do we get 4.6 million people on the same page? We have 144 politicians down there in Baton Rouge. How do we get 144 people on the same page? So if you can be successful on the basketball court, I think you can be successful politically.
And you know, it's interesting you say that, because that was one of the next things I was going to ask you about, and we actually segued into it pretty smoothly. You have a background of where you obviously coaching, you were an athlete at one point, and that's the question I was going to ask. How do most people take that background and then transition it into your career, or even just your relationships with people? Tell us a little bit about that, and even just in your own personal situation.
Sure. Being 6'4", I'd love to brag about athletic prowess. The most common question, everybody sees me and they say, "Oh, did you play basketball?" And it's like, well, play is a relative term.
Yeah.
I tried to trot out there from time to time. But even though I was not the most athletically gifted individual, I very much enjoyed playing sports, whether it was recreational or otherwise, because there were some things that I learned that I was able to take and apply, not just academically, but in my life. And some of the biggest things is, if you want to be successful at anything, it requires practice and discipline. There's no way to be the best at anything without practice. And I learned, particularly on my basketball team, being there day in and day out, learning what the coaches are trying to tell you, learning the plays, learning the sets. That made me a better individual. I look back, and I only played in a rec league when I was in high school, but my senior year, I started over a kid who was inarguably more talented than I was. But I practiced, I listened to the coaches, I was a team player. And what I've discovered is that will not only get you on the field in sports, it's what gets you on the field in life. You're going to be successful in your company. You're going to be successful in your community if you're a team player, if you practice, if you're there day in and day out, if you're always trying to fight the system. There's a spot in which you can protest what's going on. But if you're not protesting and contributing at the same time, you're always going to be out. If you just check in from time to time, you're still going to be out. If you don't have the discipline to stay committed when you're not successful, and Lord knows I've been very unsuccessful at times, but you pick yourself up and you keep going. All those skills that are common in terms that are common in athletics, these are common in life, it's common in politics, it's common to what I have to do as a professor.
Now, so you mean to tell me, contrary, now you mentioned practice, and every time you said the word practice, you probably already know who was coming in my mind. So you mean to tell me that, contrary to Allen Iverson, who mentioned that practice, you mean to tell me when you practice is important? Now, he said practice ain't important.
Well, I mean, that's probably, when I used the word practice, the first person I thought of was Allen Iverson. And I think what's really important is going back. Allen Iverson, I think, actually said something important in that. And he didn't necessarily say practice was not important.
Okay.
But what he said was sometimes people focus outwardly on the wrong thing.
Okay.
And at that day and time, people had focused unfairly on one particular aspect of him when he wanted to talk about something
that
else.
was more perspective.
Practice is important. Showing up on game day is important. But there's a lot of other little components. That's just not it to being successful. And I think of it as teaching. I have to be prepared when I step into that classroom. And I have to be on my game when I'm in that classroom. But there's a lot of other things that go on. I have to, at the same time, I got to follow what's going on. How can I tell my kids what's going on if I myself am not
involved?
Reading
Right.
I've got to be, a mentor. I've got to let these kids know who are going through difficulties, what are some things that I've seen, strategies that I can give to them, because what goes on outside the classroom can affect what's going on inside the classroom. What's going on off the court can affect somebody on the court.
On the court, right.
And so practice is a component, but discipline is a big component. Shutting out the negative, shutting out what's not healthy, focusing on the positive, surrounding yourself with supportive individuals, developing healthy habits. You can do this as an athlete. You can do this as an academic.
Yeah.
And I think there's a correlation. I don't think I've ever truly seen a truly successful athlete who didn't have some discipline in the classroom. Because even today, we demand people, there's a great deal of knowledge that goes into any game.
Yes.
And that takes discipline to what? Watch the tapes, listen to your coaches, study what people are telling you. If you don't have those habits, you can't be successful. And the same thing is academically. If you don't have the habit to study, there's no chance you're going to be successful. So, I think when I look back on my brief athletic career, those skills have made me a better individual. And so when I coach, what I'm trying to do is repay the way the community has paid for me.
Right.
There are people that taught me how to be good professors. Mm-hmm. There are people that taught me how to be a player. And so I have taken those skills and said, why keep it all to myself? Mm-hmm. Why not show your son or my son a thing or two I know about basketball? Why not show a 21-year-old a thing I know about politics? And we can try to keep them separated, but they're inextricably linked.
It's hard to separate them. And that's one of the reasons why, as we put together our production protocol and we looked at, Playmakers, and I was thinking in my mind, most of the people, well, not most, everybody that has been on the show thus far, I have a high admiration for because of what you do or what they've done in the community. And like I say, with you being mentors to some of the young people coming through the university, with you, even when your information that you provide to our community through news broadcasts as far as what's going on in the political arena, and then even just something where some people would think is small, just coaching a Little League basketball team shows true signs of playmakership. And that's one of the reasons why I was excited to be able to have you on, so continue kudos to you for some of the things that you're doing. Now, when we were talking about, obviously, politically, right now, there's a lot of different things going on, and I look back on politics and I always think about same thing that's going on now was actually probably the same thing that was going on 70 years ago. We just, with the way we have media set up now, we getting more and more of those things that are happening. Now, as a small business owner like myself and a lot of the people that are watching, we have some concerns with, where we fit at, regardless of whether you're, going to vote Republican, whether you're going to vote Democrat. At the end of the day, we have families that we have to take care of. You have a family you got to take care of, and even the people watching. As a small business owner, from your research and some of your studies, where do we fit at, and what are some of the things that we should look for and keep our eyes on, as we move forward to November?
That's a great question, DJ. And, first and foremost, there's an expression, you get the government that you deserve. Likewise, you're going to get the society that you deserve.
Right.
So first and foremost, whether you're a small business owner or not, if you don't participate politically, you're going to get what's coming to you, whether you like that or not. And it may not help you out. And so, our tendency is to what? Complain. I don't like how things are going. I don't like my schools. I don't like my street. And the first thing you can ask is, but did you vote?
Yeah.
Did you take the time to put somebody in office who would do something about your schools, who would do something about your streets, who would do something about your infrastructure, and if you're a small business owner, who would do something about your small business? So first and foremost, before we get to the Democrats versus the Republicans, we have to ask, are you voting or not voting?
Simple question.
If you're not voting, then you're just going to get what you deserve, and you may not like it. If you are voting, you have a chance to affect change in your area.
Right.
To put people in office who know your values and know what's important to you. And we focus on Washington, D.C., but that applies to Monroe or West Monroe.
Right.
That applies to the people we send to Baton Rouge, as well as Washington, D.C.
Correct.
So the first thing we have to do is participate. The second thing we have to do is keep ourselves informed. So what are the policies that are going to benefit me? I do believe there is a difference. If you push that button that says Democrat versus that button that says Republican, regardless of the name on that Democrat and Republican button, there are going to be differences in the policies that you get. And so as we're looking forward in an election year, first thing we have to do is make sure we're registered. And the second thing we have to do then is say, all right, of these two individuals who are going to be running as Democrats and Republicans in November,
Yes.
which of these two individuals do I think is going to benefit me the most? And the answer is really probably going to vary depending on your industry.
That's true.
We see, historically, two parties that kind of take different ideas in areas like the environment, which can affect if you're maybe in the oil and gas,
right.
industry. I would think that both individuals, both parties from what I see, are very small business friendly. But they take very different approach on what they define as being small business friendly.
Right, right.
I think Republicans historically have countered with trying to lessen the tax burden on small businesses. That tends to be the platforms they support.
Yes.
Democrats tend to take a different approach. They're more incentive laden. What businesses should we supply grants and startup funds for? So historically, Democratic presidencies have favored small business, first-time owner setup funds, minority owner setup funds.
Right, that's correct.
And so I think those are kind of the differences. So which approach do you like as a small business owner? Which do you think is going to affect you better? And then that's the decision you've got to make come November.
And then that's the button, whatever button that is, that's the button you hit.
That's the button you got to
hit a button, though.
I think the most important thing, yes, is
hit a button.
Get in there and hit a button. And there, truthfully, depending on your criteria, there may not necessarily be a right or wrong answer. What's right for me may not be right for you. What's right as a small businessman may not be right for a large business or self-employed. So you have to determine what is right for my business.
And the only way you can determine that is by obtaining and gathering the right kind of information.
Absolutely.
And doing your own research.
You have to be a registered voter. Secondly, you have to be an informed voter. Make that decision yourself. I always tell my students when they walk into the classroom, and if you were in my classroom, that, DJ, you're here today. I don't care what your neighbor thinks. I don't care what your wife thinks. I don't care what your pastor. I don't care what anybody but DJ thinks.
Right.
At this time and place. And that requires for you to tell me what you are thinking. That requires you to tell me what is your argument and make that argument. That's what we've got to do when we go to the voting booth. Not what is everybody else around you saying, because they might have it wrong.
Yeah.
What do you know? What do you want to say? And then push that button.
Push that button. Now, for the people out there watching right now, Josh, that may have further questions or may just want to connect with you for that insight, that information, some of the young people that maybe want to connect with you, because you mentioned earlier about mentorships and sort of just guidance and just to have a better understanding of the political arena, or just may have questions, general questions. What's the best way? Social media, email? Give us that information.
Sure. I mean, you can find me on Twitter. J Stockley is simply my handle on Twitter. Joshua Stockley on Facebook. And if you want to email me, you can email me stockley@ulm.edu, and you can ask me any questions that you may have. And another thing to do is ask people in those areas. One of the best things you can do, especially if you're a young person, you think you might be interested in politics, find a lawyer to shadow. Find a representative or a senator to shadow, or a judge to shadow. Volunteer to go work in their office. See what the process is like. And at the same time, see what's important to those individuals. All of our representatives and senators have different values.
Yes.
And so shadow those people. See how their values influence their day-to-day lives and inform the decisions they make. And whether you want to be a doctor or you want to go into politics, by getting that internship and by shadowing that professional, you see what their day-to-day life is, and then you can make an assessment. Is this something that I think I want to do down the road? And that's the best way to know.
That's one of the best ways. I mean, even for myself right now, I'm doing something similar to that. Even in this side of my business, and even in the education side, where you're following up behind somebody who's already been there. And I think that's some great information. We're gonna get ready to wrap up here, but before we leave, Josh, man, it was great to have you on. Man, I know we can probably talk another 3 hours about this particular, this particular subject matter because of the importance, And so, but before we get ready to wrap up, what I'd like for you to do, just give us that one thing that you feel the people that are watching, especially the playmakers, those people who are out trying to make a difference. What would be that one thing that you would tell them, or that advice you give them as we move forward on this political year? And what's that's that one thing that you would tell them?
I think the biggest thing you can do is educate yourself. Do the research to know fact versus fiction, both in terms of your political parties and your candidates. Find out where they stand, and then link that to where you stand, and then make a selection. And argue as well to your friends. Bring that up to your friends. Let them know that you're plugging in, and encourage them to plug in as well. Again, if you don't participate, then you can't complain about what happens. But if you have a say and you're influential, not only do you have the right to say something about what's going on, you might affect what's going on.
That's the kind of information you get on Playmakers. I really appreciate everybody that tuned in with us. Continue to check with us. Go to our website, www.justruntheplay.com. Once again, you can even check with us on Twitter @JustRunThePlay. It's Coach DJ with Dr. Joshua Stockley. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Coach.
This week's episode is brought to you by 318 Now Podcast. 318 Now Podcast focuses on the 318 community, where community leaders, entrepreneurs, and influential figures from the 318 area are brought on as guests each week. 318 Now Podcast motivates, informs, consults, and entertains its audience. Episodes are released every Tuesday evening, where they can be downloaded by visiting the 318 Now Podcast Facebook page or on iTunes. Like the 318 Now Podcast Facebook page for episode previews and releases.
Introduce who you all been waiting for. Sponsored by Just Run the Play Company, LLC. You all may know him by many names, but you only need to know one.